Welcome to Lift Your Story podcast with guest Randi-Lee Bowslaugh, author and speaker. Hi everyone, I am Lori-Ann. I am that gal from Milton, Ontario, Canada, and I'm with.
I am that guy. I am Roy Miller from Dallas, Texas. Welcome to our Lift Your Story podcast.
In this episode, we have Randi-Lee Bowslaugh with us. She's an author and a speaker, and we're very pleased to have you here today with us. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Great. So, Randy, you're a counselor, right?
Well, I was a counselor.
Social worker and counselor.
Yeah, employment counselor. Yep.
So, how did you get into that, or why did you get into that?
I fell backwards into it. So when I went to college, by the time I applied, there wasn't a lot of options left to apply to because I didn't actually decide I was going to go until like July. So most things were closed. So what I ended up doing is just looking at what was available for September start. And I went to pre-community services. And then from there, that was only a 1-year program. So from there, I was like, okay, what real program, not that it wasn't a real program, but you couldn't really get a job out of it, right? So what other program matched the courses I already had so that I didn't have to take a whole bunch of new ones? So then I ended up going to community and justice services and loved that program. I did a placement at a drug and alcohol recovery house and just learned a whole bunch of the skills for counseling and social services, that kind of thing. So from there, right after I graduated and I was looking for a job, at first I was like, I want to work in literacy because that sounds like so much fun. And I want to work in drug and alcohol recovery. Those were kind of my two big things I was looking for because that's where I did my placement too. And I'm like, I absolutely love this. It's so much fun. There's not a lot of jobs out there for that where I live. So I ended up becoming a literacy assistant at our local Native Center. And from there, another opening opens up there for, it was a big long title, but really career counseling. Went into that. And then after that contract was up, I had a couple of years under my belt to do that work. And so the rest is history. I did that for 6 years before I went, maybe something else.
So for us here in the U.S., you said you worked in a Native
center, yeah. So they're Native friendship centers where I am. Well, I guess where Lori-Ann is too, because I'm in Ontario too.
So what exactly is that?
So it's like a community center idea. So it's like a community center that has a bunch of different programs, all geared towards the Indigenous community. Okay. And so it'll have stuff for like babies and literacy, employment. We have active living, counselors, just a whole bunch of different programs, all geared towards the Indigenous people and their culture and using their traditions to do all that.
Okay, I assume that's what it was, but I wasn't sure. That's why.
Always good to ask.
Because I thought, well, maybe in Canada, it's something different than when you say Native here, what our perception of Native is.
It's true.
Compared to yours. That's why I wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So
Roy, is it the same when you say Native? Is it the same as ours?
Well, if you say Native Americans, here you would be talking about the American Indian.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, if you say Native Texan, that's a whole different thing. But yeah. If you say Native here, we take that to be Native American Indians.
Okay, so the same.
Yeah, that's what I assumed. I wanted to make sure.
Oh yeah. So
you wrote a couple of books. Can you tell us about that?
I did. I have published 5 books so far. So, wow. 3 of them are based on my life experience, life story. 2 of those are around mental health. And 1 of them is around raising my child with autism, right from when I was pregnant up until I think the story goes till grade 6, I want to say. I'm writing part 2 right now because we're in grade 9 now. But we have to live it before I can write it. Mm-hmm. And the other 2 are kids' books. One's a Christmas story and one is about my cat that I had growing up, because she was the best kitty cat. So I had to make a story about her, and it's written for like really little kids, just learning to read. It's all rhyming.
That's fun.
Can you go back? You mentioned your story. Can you kind of give us a little bit about your story?
Of course. So I'll give you the short version because it can be pretty long. Growing up, at first, like when I was little, it was pretty typical. I mean, my parents, I never remember them ever being together. So my mom was a single mom. I went with my dad every other weekend. Me and my brother had different dads, same mom, but my brother would come with me until he was 12, and he decided, I won't go no more because your dad's kind of a poopy head. And he wasn't wrong, but at the time I was like, oh, I want you to come with me. So my brother was 4 years older than me. And so eventually he started getting into trouble. He got into drugs. That'll come back into the story later. And my mom ended up getting married when I was in the summer between grade 8 and 9. She ended up getting married, and turned out he was a big old alcoholic. So after probably about the first year or so, it just started getting progressively worse. And so I'd go home after school, being in high school, and I never knew if I was walking into the door to the nice stepfather or the one that was already drunk and throwing things and yelling. So that was a really hard time to, I mean, as a teenager in general, it's hard enough going through puberty, let alone not knowing what to expect when you walk in that door. Because of all of that and my brother getting into trouble, my mom focused on my brother and my stepfather, and I felt completely left out. As an adult, I've had great conversations with my mom now about how she thought I was fine, so that's why she didn't worry about me, that kind of thing. But I also never told her, hey, Mom, I'm depressed. I'm not feeling proper. Like this something is wrong with me. I'm thinking about hurting myself. I never spoke up. And so that's a really big part of my books, is telling people you got to speak up, because she never knew. Fast forward a little bit, I moved out of my mom's house when I was 17 because I just couldn't take it anymore. Moved in with a friend. Still never really felt like home because it wasn't my home. Eventually, my mom and him split up, and I ended up actually moving in with another friend, but we were just renting an apartment together, so I wasn't with her family anymore because by then I was 18, and it felt more like my home because it was my apartment. Then I got pregnant. I did graduate from high school, just barely, because I just didn't care about anything at that time. And got pregnant, had a beautiful little baby. And then when I was 19, I met my husband. We've been married now 9 years. And I never thought I'd find somebody, because when you're in that state of mind of life is no good, you don't think that you're ever going to find somebody. But apparently he puts up with me. So after that, he convinced me, hey, why don't you go to college? And I had already applied to university out of high school. I got into all the universities I applied to. I just didn't go because I wasn't feeling good about myself. I was too depressed to make that effort to go. So with his support, I was like, okay, sure. And you already heard that story. After I graduated, I actually graduated at the top of my class when I did it, because I enjoyed the program. I was feeling it better. I had my own place, no roommates, none of that. It was just me and the baby. My boyfriend, now husband, right, was there all the time, but we weren't living together quite yet. So I just felt so much better. After graduating, I got that job. Things were looking pretty good. We did move in together. And then when my child was 8, and he was having a lot of issues, we just didn't know what the heck it was about. When he was 8, we finally got the diagnosis of autism. And everything went, oh, it makes so much sense why everything's happening. We just thought that you were being a little pain in my butt, right? You're just not listening. You're just not doing what you're supposed to do. But it was meltdowns. It was sensory overload. My contract ended at the Native Center. I started working at another community place, which I really enjoyed at first. But as that went, my child's outbursts and school behavior just got worse and worse and worse, to the point that I was being called at work couple times a week to go and pick him up. I couldn't stay at work. It was so hard. I started feeling like the worst person ever. I couldn't keep my house clean. I couldn't take care of my child. I couldn't work properly. And so the depression just came back bigger and badder than ever. And from there, I actually ended up taking a leave of absence from work for a bit, for about 3 months, went back part-time. Through all of that, my child's meltdowns were getting so bad that sometimes we had to call the police to come and assist us to take him to the hospital because we just couldn't handle it. He was hurting himself, he was hurting us. There was just no way we could keep everyone safe. Also, then he started to go a little further than just hurting himself. He actually tried to kill himself multiple times, which is why I like to speak out about mental health, because our system is so broken, so very broken. And so in and at the hospital for him, again, that's just making me feel worse as a parent. And then I took another leave of absence, ended up getting diagnosed with cancer. So I didn't even have time to process the fact that I was told I had cancer because I was too busy going in and out the hospital with my kid. I ended up having 2 surgeries. After the second surgery, I got an infection and almost died. And then finally, my child was accepted to a treatment facility for 3 months. So he went up there to London, Ontario, was there for 3 months. We'd pick him up Friday night and drop him off Sunday evening. So then he was there from Sunday to Friday. I had time to finally breathe and process everything that was going on. Throughout all of that too, I started on antidepressants. I went to therapy. I was taking care of what I needed to take care of finally for me. And that was now 2 years ago. And since then, he has not tried to hurt himself. We haven't had a hospital trip. I haven't thought about hurting myself, not too much anyways. Had a little blip last year. But things are going much better. So that's my super short version, and I know it wasn't really that short.
Well, it was interesting to me because I have a niece that has a son that has some issues, and she's been trying to get him into a place. It sounds like similar to what you're talking about, where he could go for like a 3-month program to really find out. I think his are more emotional. It's a long story, but I think some things have happened to him, or he's seen some things, but he won't talk about them.
Yeah.
And they get him in. He's being kicked out of every daycare, school. He took a knife to school. He was going to stab somebody. He was mad.
My kid did that too, not to stab somebody, but to protect himself. He felt like he needed to protect himself.
And so, hearing your story, it sounds like to me if she could get him into one of those programs, and she's a social worker, but I mean, there are so many hoops to jump through and all this stuff, and she's trying to get him in there, and it sounds like that might be a solution for him as well.
Yeah, it was the best thing.
I was actually saying why I went yes. I have almost brings me to tears, but I have a friend who she had twins, and one of them is autistic. And as he became an adult, and he was like 6'4", and she said, and she's just like, she's 5'5", and she said it became really difficult. So yes, the London, Ontario facility is tremendous. It made a huge difference for her son as well. So that's why when you said, I was wondering where you had brought him when you said London, Ontario. Yes, like I mean they just her story. She said that he's now on his own, under supervision, so to speak. But he's got his own little place. He's doing gardening, and she says it's just fantastic the difference that these people have done for him. So yeah. Very interesting. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, it was the biggest difference. And just this past school year, first year of high school, right? Straight A's.
Wow.
Never had done that before, ever.
That's fantastic.
Well, you were talking about when you were growing up, you said you just never said anything. You never talked about it, but let's just say you suffered in silence. Okay.
Yeah.
And a lot of people we've interviewed, they said the same thing. They said, I wish I would have said something. I should have said something. And then when you got, what was interesting to me is when you got away from all that, got on your own, so to speak, your own place, all that, you know, you had a whole shift in your life.
Yeah.
You know, you went to college, you excelled, you know.
Yeah, it's not to say it wasn't without its bad days, but
well, sure,
they were a lot further apart than every day.
Yeah, well, that's amazing. You know, that one thing helped you so much moving forward.
And college alone taught me so many things in general, because you get to meet this wide variety of people that come from so many different backgrounds. It's just eye-opening to really listen to everybody else. And then it's like, oh, growing up the way I grew up actually isn't normal. Because when you're living it, it's your normal. Right. You don't know any different.
Exactly.
But when you start meeting all these people and being able to process all the trauma that you went through, it's like, oh, wow, okay, this wasn't normal, and I do have some stuff I need to work through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. So I've got to ask you, kickboxing. Now, I mean, where did that come from?
So it was almost 10 years ago now. We put our son into jiu-jitsu.
Okay.
And during his jiu-jitsu class, there was a cardio kickboxing adult class going on. And I look at my husband and go, they have really nice bums. I want to have a really nice bum. That's actually what got me into it. So I joined the cardio class, really enjoyed it, and I went, maybe I'll try the regular kickboxing class. So I tried that, enjoyed it, and went, maybe I want to compete one day. Then once I started competing, I just kept going.
That's neat.
That's interesting. You know, are you still competing?
Well, with COVID, nobody is.
Oh,
yeah, true.
We're still locked down here, right?
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Y'all are really locked down in Ontario.
Stage 2 now.
Very slow process, yes.
Yeah.
Although when they kind of opened it up, all of a sudden there was like, you know, everything was really busy, like, because we were going, yay!
It's true. Yeah, the gyms aren't open yet, so we'll see what happens when all the gyms open and everybody goes, oh, flocks back to them.
Dude, that's been tough on the gyms. That's unfortunate. I mean, it's been tough on the restaurants too.
Oh,
but
yeah.
The restaurants have had bigger spurts of being able to be open, because you have a gym and they go, I think you can only have 10 people in a gym at any one time. That's
and they're still not open. You can have outdoor classes right now, but not indoor. And for the sport of kickboxing, I mean, it's not super helpful.
That's really interesting. I had actually one of my friends used to do kickboxing. He used to say, you should try it. You should try it. I'm like, oh,
yeah.
You know, it may not be a bad idea. I was talking about taking boxing lessons, in fact, because it's good therapeutically, right? Like it's
yeah, you get to get that aggression out. Plus, I mean, exercise in general releases your endorphins. This is super high cardio, so that helps. I'd say do kickboxing, not just boxing, because then you're using your legs too.
That's true.
Well, that's so what are you doing now?
So well, I train online a couple of people and do a couple classes online as a personal trainer and fitness instructor. Although now that the States is all open up, I've lost a lot of people because they can all go back to real life gym. So I've been doing that, as well as writing more books, of course. And I'm hosting my own YouTube show. It's called The Write or Die Show, and I'm interviewing other authors to talk about mental health. And I'm going to be starting a new program soon for people who want to write their own stories, so I can help them to do that. Because I get a lot of questions. Well, I've always wanted to write my own book, but how do I do it? And so I'm developing a program to help people be able to do that, because it is therapeutic. And I mean, for a lot of people, it is a great platform for getting known out in the world too for their business. So
Yeah, I was surprised at still the low percentage. I mean, I speak to so many people who have books that are published, and yet the percentage, though, I guess it just must be the circle I run in, because the percentage is still really low. And I still, when I go out there, people will say, wow, you wrote a book? Oh, really? You have a book? You're a published author? And I'm thinking, yeah, but I know like a bazillion of them that I've interviewed. It's like, but again,
right,
because we're in that
it's
circle, right?
exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, now I've interviewed, I think I've got 30 episodes up already, and I've got a whole bunch more to edit. So it's like, yeah, I know a ton of them now, but yeah, the average person actually hasn't. They've thought about it, from what I hear. People have all thought about it, but they've never done anything with that.
I think the percent is really low. Don't quote me on this. I heard someone said 3%. It's as low as 3% of the population have written a book. So, but I know it's not that high at all. But like I said, when you're talking, you don't think that.
Yeah.
And was something else I was going to ask, and I just lost that idea altogether. Oh yes, for your writing and helping other people out. That's really good thing. I mean, there are some and no disrespect to the people who out there do help people write books, but a lot of them are unaffordable for
They really are.
the small person who just wants to start off. So if you can do something like that, help people and make it affordable to them, I think that's just absolutely wonderful.
Yeah. And I think people, and this is just my belief, I've got no idea, I have no facts to back this up, but I think people think writing a book is a lot harder than it is. And so the way that I'm doing it is I'm developing modules that they can watch to help them to write their story. Because a lot of times people, they think it's hard, so they get somebody else to write it for them, right? They get that, what's that called? A ghostwriter to do it for them.
Yeah.
And yeah, they're way too unaffordable for the average person. But if they knew how to go about plotting out their story and being able to write it, I think most people would be able to do it. And not everybody wants to write a story just to have it published. Sometimes they want to write a story so that they can give it to their friend, to their family, and pass that down. And so it leaves them a little bit of history about family members, 3-4 generations down the line. So that's what I think is going to be a little bit different. Of course, I will have a level where people want me to help them edit and do all that stuff. But I think the average person just wants to get it out, and it's therapeutic to get your story out, especially if you've experienced trauma. And maybe you don't want to share that trauma with the world, but you need to get it out.
It's funny because I created a character, and at 22 I wrote the book. I didn't publish it till 30 years later.
There you go.
Out there, but it was because I had fun doing it at the time.
Yeah.
I did try and go through publishers back, because I mean back then we didn't have self-publishing.
Yeah.
And so I would put it out to the publishers as we do, but yeah, so it doesn't matter even if you have something you've written before. And I'm sure that you'd help them with that too, with the self-publishing aspect of it.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the modules of how to go about self-publishing it, and how to get on people's podcasts.
There you go.
Because that's a big part of it. If they do want to do that and publish and get it out there, you gotta put yourself out there, really.
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, that's kind of where we started, because we found out interviewing people that no matter who it is, everyone has a story.
Yeah.
And it's something that other people can relate to. Even you may not realize the importance of your story, but a lot of people can relate to your story.
I totally agree, because I used to, before I started going on all these podcasts and stuff, I used to think, oh, my story's not that interesting, whatever. It's just my life. Like, it's normal to me, right? So I didn't see it as being inspiring to other people. Then when I started telling others, they're like, oh my goodness, wow, you overcame that. You had to deal with this. And like you said, Lorianne, a little bit of tears at that one point. I didn't think that my story would have that kind of effect on people, but it does. And so we don't know what our story means to somebody else until we start telling them.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly. So how can our listeners reach out to you, Randy?
So I am on lots of social media things. My website is rbwriting.ca, and then you can find my email there if you want to do it that way. As well, I'm on Facebook at RB Writing and Write or Die Show. I've got two. I'm on Instagram at Randy B Writing. And I'm now on TikTok. I'm so excited about that. I'm on TikTok at Write or Die Show. And then, of course, my YouTube channel is Write or Die Show. And write like writing something, WRITE.
Okay.
Love it.
Right.
And all of my books are on Amazon.
Good. Cool.
That is fantastic. Thank you so much. We really enjoyed this, and thanks for sharing that story. And I do know that yes, definitely people will relate to your story for sure.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
thanks for having me. This was fun.
yeah.
Definitely. All right. Well, you take care.
Okay. Thank you for spending time with us, Randy.
Absolutely.
Thanks. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Be sure to visit us at lifterstory.com.